Good day, Chief here for Chief Tells Tales, CTT. Last week I mentioned that I had a problem soldier. Besides the other one that decided to burn his arm in two places with cigarette filters. As I said when I first got to Fort Stewart, I got in charge of the SIGINT section, as they called it. And then about 2/3 of the way through my career there, I got in charge of the CMD. These are the only other place that they could send me for my MOS. CMD is collection, management, and dissemination. Basically, we are the ones that answer questions that come into the shop. And we look up the information and we got to get them back out in a timely manner sometime. Also inheriting that section, I got in charge of the secret library, which is where we received all the publications that we had to keep track of because they would come with a piece of tracking paper. You had to fill the paper out and send it back to verify that you got this document, and if not, there would be questions answered, or asked, I guess I should say, and then questions would be answered. The room was a mess, mostly, at one time, but a female soldier who was very good, who I inherited in this new squad, she took it upon herself to get the library straightened out. She did a really good job on that. Why am I so small? I'm a little bit larger. There we go. So she did a real good job, and then I lost her, and then I got another sergeant of questionable nature, and he wanted to redo the whole room. I said, don't touch a thing. We just got this room straightened out, but he wanted to do it a different way, which would have just made it impossible to work in there except for him. Now, my problem soldier, throughout my military career, I had my major difficulties with soldiers from two particular states, West Virginia and Louisiana. This guy was from Louisiana, and I think he was from the Bayou country. The problem with this soldier was he was slow by nature. It wasn't slow physically, he wasn't slow mentally, because, throughout my career, I would hear colonels and above, generals, 1 stars, 2 stars, 3 stars. Yes, you military guys, you're the top 5, 10, 15% of the Army. You guys are so smart, you do great things. And then I would look around the room sometimes and I'd be like, sir, if you knew what some of the stuff that these soldiers do and how some are dumber than a box of rocks sometimes, you probably would retract that statement, but that's beyond. So I had trouble with this soldier. Did a room inspection. He had a pile of sand in a corner of his room. And he couldn't explain it. He said, I swept the floor. It wasn't there when I swept the floor. We're not talking a little. We're talking a pile of sand. He lived by himself because nobody wanted to live with him. Understandable. He ended up lying to one of my company commanders because this is back in the day. This is what, 1995, 96, 97. So food wasn't cheap, but he told a company commander that he alone ate takeout food in excess of $100. I think it was like $125, because I think he got in trouble and wrote a couple paper checks. So we had to get that straightened out. But he told the company commander, I alone ate all that food. I didn't share it with anybody. I talked to the soldiers that lived on the same building and floor with him, and they basically said that he would share his leftovers occasionally. I don't know about that particular week or not, but what else? Then he also said there was a magazine campaign that was going around, so the minute you said yes, you automatically signed up for like 10, 15 magazines, and if you didn't pay them, you would not get your magazines, and you wouldn't get your magazines to begin with, so we had to wheel and deal to get him out of that financial difficulty. And one day a warrant officer came at me and said, I need 50 items. Gave me a list, 50 items. We'll put it like that. And I need to know what these 50 items can do. Well, it was a hectic day. We were reorganizing the skiff. We were systems were down, and I didn't have the soldiers to spare to look through the Jane's military manuals to find out what these 50 items can do. Another warrant officer came up to me and said, oh, by the way, what he's asking for is in that safe. We had safes that are basically filing cabinets, but you put a lock on them and they become safes because we had a lot of paperwork that I had to keep behind nose itches. You know, keep behind and out of sight when we closed up for the day. And yeah, that list is in there. Well, he wants it now. I got written up by a warrant officer. The only time I ever got written up by a warrant officer because I did not address his problem. And then the next day when the guy came in to open up the safe, we got the list, I handed it to him. He says, oh, I don't need it. I don't need it anymore. So I gave it to my problem soldier because he could run a piece of equipment, the only one that was operational that day, so he could look up stuff online. So I got a list of 50 items. After 4 or 5 hours, this guy came back with 5. What were you doing? So that's why I got in trouble. So I just was getting more frustrated and more frustrated what to do with this guy, and I was even talking to the first sergeant at this time. And the first sergeant talked me into giving this soldier to him. Big mistake. The first sergeant says obviously he can't handle the MOS he's in, so I'm going to turn him into a supply MOS. So he gave him to our supply sergeant. And this soldier would come back to us. He'd come down to the skiff and he would show us all this marvelous stuff that supposedly was given to him by the supply sergeant. I'm talking about, you know, military notebooks that you generally use out in the field, you know, with the paper and nice camouflage and everything else, and a few other items like that I can't remember. And we're like, are you sure those were given to you? Because those look like something an officer would probably want more than you. You're just using it as I got it rather than I need it. So even the first sergeant got upset with this guy, gave him back to me, and started the process of getting this guy chaptered out of the Army. Failure to adapt to military. So the first sergeant. So about a couple months before this guy was finally chaptered out of the Army, or he came to me one day. He'd been driving a pickup truck the whole time he's been there. He goes, Sergeant, how do I get insurance? I go, what, life insurance? No, auto. I said, excuse me? He says, yeah, I need to get auto insurance for my truck. I don't have any. I said, you've been here since time and date, and you've been driving your truck on base without auto insurance this whole time? Yeah, I didn't know I needed it. Didn't you have auto insurance back in your home state? No, I mostly drove out in the countryside, so no big deal. Besides, my grandmother gave me the truck. Oh, okay. So I told him, shop around. Yeah, he probably didn't. I don't know if he even got an auto insurance to tell you. I think he did. And what was hilarious, and probably the just reward, is that 2 weeks prior to him getting chaptered out of the Army, he rear-ended a military police vehicle on base and totaled his truck. So I think he had insurance. Otherwise, he'd probably be going to Fort Leavenworth. So that was my headache. And I had another headache. I had like I said, a sergeant that got thrown on me. He always used to walk in with a toothpick in his mouth from lunch. I gave him 2 verbals. Like on a Monday, like on a Tuesday, for an example. Wednesday, he walked in, toothpick in his mouth. I wrote him up. And a warrant officer thanked me for that because he was in charge of his non-commissioned officer report. So he used that as evidence to see how well this guy was also another failure to adapt and perform in a military manner. I wrote him up, and I also put him on there on that statement, because when you do a counseling, you have to put in everything that you talk about. And I said, if this happens again, I'm taking you directly to the first sergeant. So Thursday, after writing him up on Wednesday, he walked in. I was standing right there at the copier machine, and he damn near choked to death swallowing his toothpick. And I said, lesson learned. And didn't see a toothpick in his mouth ever again. Now, what's funny about that copier is, I don't know if anybody knows the history, but that is also the military, where I worked at Fort Stewart is also the military base where Warrant Officer Hall was working and copying documents on that very same copier that I was using, that he was selling to what he thought were Russian agents that turned out to be FBI, and went to prison or went to Leavenworth for trying to sell secrets. Was pointed out to me one day when I was using the copier, and I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. A shame to the warrant officers, but he didn't get very far in the warrant officer rank. I don't even think he made 2. I'll have to look. Really don't know. That's about it for today. Trouble with soldiers. Just trouble with soldiers. I know this is supposed to be my career, but I'm also talking about what happened to me as a squad leader. Like I said, I performed really well at Fort Stewart. I shined as a staff sergeant. I was a staff sergeant throughout the whole time there, because, like I said, there was 4 boards that I went through for our sergeant first class. 2 got selected, 1 got selected, 0 got selected, 1 got selected. I can't remember if it was the 0 year or the 1 year. I had the sergeant major of our battalion, the new sergeant major, the second one I served under, called me personally at my house one night to tell me I did not make sergeant first class. Now, when sergeant majors get together, they like to brag. This very same year that he called me to tell me that I did not make sergeant first class, I came to find out, because he's got a plethora of MOSs, because he's got all of us MI guys. He's got a company, or part of a company of a maintenance, so he's got truck drivers, truck mechanics, track mechanics, everything. And then he's also got a department that works on our radios and our other equipment. So he's got plethora of MOSs. Out of all those MOSs, he had not a single staff sergeant made sergeant first class. So I wonder how he felt the next time he got together with the rest of the sergeant majors on post and could not brag at how many sergeant first class he's got promoted. I mean, it was a sad day for him. And when he called me and he told me, I said, I'm not surprised. And he goes, well, what do you mean, Sergeant? And I told him the story about how I got promoted with 3 other sergeant or staff sergeants in Hawaii, and how one of us, who never worked the MOS, got promoted the following year to sergeant first class. So she was one of the 2 at the very first board I was under. Like I said, that's it. Trouble with soldiers. Switching sections, having fun. I actually had fun in CMD section. At first I didn't want it, because mostly of the library, and mostly because I became the answer man. But I had fun. I really had fun. So this is Chief out. Remember, freedom's not free. Thank a bet, hug a bet, and Happy New Year.